the Brunch Podcast. DJ Bean, John Wick Chapter 4, rated R, action crime thriller, runtime of 169 minutes. That's long.
Yeah, but this was what. So going into it, and I hope we're not telling tales out of school here. Not only did we see it in the same theater, buddy, we were sitting next to each other. Or
we both had popcorn.
Yeah, I suppose you were sitting next to Pete Blackburn, my co-host. But when Pete and I went to do our review of this, one of the things I can tell you, you're a big organizer for your podcast. Yes,
I try.
Yeah, so going in, I try to have as many things organized that can be kind of evergreen before I need to tack on the thoughts after. I knew going into a review about John Wick 4, one of the topics was going to be, is it too long? Because it runs nearly 3 hours. So as I was watching the movie, I already had it in my mind, like, all right, DJ, let me know when this feels too long. It never feels too long. I love this movie. I hope I'm not shooting my wad just by saying, like, this is incredible. My favorite of the four, Pete's favorite of the four, and the reason it doesn't feel too long is because it's almost set up like mini games, and there are these acts where you get into them and you don't care about how is this movie going to end. You are so into John Wick versus this guy or the stakes that he currently encounters. Not a second of this movie is wasted. It never feels too long, and it gets better as it goes on. To me.
So I would say, to me, there is a bit of a bore tail end of maybe second act, early third act, where some of the action feels a bit samey, but then you get to this awesome, and this isn't a true spoiler, but this awesome overhead action scene that pulls you right back in, and it brings you to, so Chapter 3, I thought, was a very good movie. The open to that, the first 30 minutes is balls out. I think the most fun that you have with any Wick movie. But then the following hour and a half gets a little lost.
Totally agree.
But this overhead shot brings you right back to that same fun that you have in 3.
Yeah, so we did a spoiler-free review, and Pete said there's one scene late in the movie that is so incredibly good. And I stopped him and I was like, we're not doing spoilers, but are you talking about the indoor one or the outdoor one? Because they're basically back to back.
Yes.
And he was like, the indoor one. So the overhead scene is incredible, and that's the indoor scene. And I can tell which part you're talking about, where you say it feels a little samey. Is it during, let's call it like the radio scene?
Yeah. And it feels samey in the fact that the action is just, it's a lot of the same fight moves and everything else. But I will say this about the movie is that this is the best edited John Wick movie, where Definitely. It is the most fluent. It has all the same stylized scenes. But say if you go back and you watch Wick 1 or Wick 2, and this is not a big knock against the movie, the action scenes are a little cut heavy. This one doesn't have that.
Yeah, this looks the best. It is the best edited.
Yes,
it is definitely the most fluid, even though I'm going to, and I went back and I saw this on opening day. I just because I love the movie so much. This is a movie that maybe you'll rewatch in half-hour chunks as you're getting ready for work in the morning, because like it really does have like an episodic quality to it, parts of it, and the bad guys are all great. Each fight scene, I agree that the fighting is kind of plateaued overall for the franchise, which isn't a big drawback for me. I know that obviously the fight scenes has been kind of the hallmark of this movie, but of this franchise, but this is such a good movie that even if there's a 5-minute fight scene that doesn't show you anything you haven't seen before, the stakes and the context of it are probably going to be so good that you're tied it over until it gets to the next big moment for you.
Rotten Tomatoes right now, highest for critics, highest for audience, 95, 96. And I get it. It's also a little bit early with the audience. Got to see what's happening there. More importantly, Metacritic, 79, highest of the 4 there as well. So critics are absolutely loving it. And when it comes to this franchise, to these 4 movies, biggest thing about it, same director, Chad Stahelski.
Stunt guy, knows what the hell he's doing, knows knows what he wants in an action movie and executes it in such a way that I'll go back to the indoor overhead scene where you'll know when you see it. After I saw it a second time, I was like, I am just never going to get over this scene and how good it looks. A, how good it looks, but B, there's stuff in the story in that, let's say, setting, building, whatever, that so much is accomplished in that one scene. And it tells me that Stahelski is a way better director than I thought. Like, I thought he had found his, like, this is his lane and this is the thing that he can do, but he's doing it more and better as the series goes on, which I didn't see coming. I didn't love John Wick 3. I loved the first two. I think that this is the best of the four, though. So to come off of one that I don't want to say is underwhelming, but just not up to the standard of the first two, especially after such a long layoff, because this is the longest layoff between John Wick movies, really blew my mind. Like, this movie kind of snuck up on me. I knew that it was coming out, and by the time I saw it, and by the time I realized about halfway through it, this is my second favorite John Wick movie, and then I waited 5 minutes and realized, wait, this is my favorite John Wick movie. It kind of blew my mind.
I also think a big thing about it is that for a plot where you're reintroducing this high table, all these intricate, weird things that kind of got muddied in the third chapter, even a little muddied in chapter 2, but they made it as simple as Bill Skarsgård's the bad guy, which, by the way, I think he is the best villain so far, which really propels this as well. And he's the bad guy, and you need to get to this point, and that's the goal of the movie. It's almost as simple as the first movie. They killed the dog, they stole the car, let's get some revenge here. It's almost that simple, but this builds, I think, the best world around him, because the characters that they use in the movie between Kane, Tracker, Shamazu, sorry about the pronunciations, and Akira. I think Akira, and you didn't stick around for the post-credit scene, but
right, I
Akira,
saw it the second time. I saw it, so fortunately I saw it the second time.
Yes.
I was like, what the hell was I doing? But yeah, definitely note that. There is a post-credit scene, and it resolves something that maybe if you didn't see the post-credit scene, you would have been like, man, why'd they leave that storyline there and then never really hit it? Foolish of me, rookie mistake to not stick around for the.
Well, not only that, when they pick this series back up, either with these characters in, say, a decade, which is kind of what they're talking about, or if they use some of these characters in the Ballerina franchise movies that are coming out as well, I think that she'll be in them.
Yeah, and I'm glad that you mentioned the surrounding cast, because it is definitely the best of the John Wick movies. I think that Ian McShane and Lance Reddick, those are like your set it and forget it's. They're always going to be outstanding. Rest in peace, Lance Reddick. But Hiroyuki Sanada, who played Shimazu, was awesome.
Yes.
Donnie Yen as Kane, incredible. If Bill Skarsgård is the best villain in the John Wick franchise, Kane is the best frenemy in the John Wick franchise, which, like, frenemies, obviously, going back to the first one, it's sort of the bread and butter of this franchise, where it's a bunch of assassins and they all know at some point their time is going to come where they cross paths in the wrong way. And Kane is incredible. I do agree with you on Skarsgård, just unbelievable. And Mr. Nobody, Shamier Anderson, awesome character. A different type of frenemy for John Wick, because generally it's somebody from his past. And this movie has, when Kane encounters John Wick, there's the thing where they come face to face, and there's like this shared sadness that, like, man, they gave you my name, huh? Yeah. Damn, sorry it has to be like this. Mr. Nobody is more, doesn't know John Wick, and he's like, who's this John Wick of whom I hear so much? Let me try to get in on some of this money. And throughout the movie, the relationship between John Wick and Mr. Nobody is amazing. And it still kind of has the, look, we share a common enemy, even though, like, spoilers, Bill Skarsgård wants Mr. Nobody to kind of do his bidding. But the way they do the frenemy thing in this movie is better than in any of the other ones, which I assumed even after John Wick 1, that was kind of checked off as, look, like we've set this bar and it's probably not going to go higher.
And then also with Donnie Yen. So John Wick, I don't think, even throughout the entire franchise, but definitely in this movie, doesn't say more than 2 lines in a row.
Whoa.
Very soft-spoken. Whoa. Yeah. Keanu Reeves stuff. But Donnie Yen has such a charm to him that it's a great counterpoint.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, and this movie is also maybe the most philosophical of the 4, and that there will be a lot of like, there's 2 men in this world, men who do this and men who do this, or whatever, or like and I'm just using examples because I don't want to give away quotes in the movie, but it would just be like a lot of like parables and shit like that, and that's the type of thing that probably does work in the tongue-in-cheek world of John Wick. It definitely works in this movie, but I think more so in this movie than other ones. You will get to a character kind of waxing poetic for a little bit. Bill Skarsgård's character, awesome for that, and Donnie Yen's character, awesome for that. And over just Kane is an incredible character. His fight scenes are amazing, but the story, his story is interesting. Right off the top in this movie, you're kind of your heart breaks for him, and you know that this is going to be, he's going to have to make a lot of tough choices. Really, really well done.
Yeah, and one of the reasons why Mac didn't go to the screening, I think he was tired, but also he has an issue with the John Wick movies through the first 3. He's seen the first 3 where he feels like it's just action for action, and he wants a little bit more to like the meat, and this one does give that to you.
Yeah, this is the meatiest of this. This has the best story of them. Again, you're feeling for Kane, a character you didn't know, pretty early in the movie, and you're kind of rooting for him, even though you know this is probably going to end with he and John bumping heads a couple of times. But the story here and filling out the whole high table thing, if you are the type that likes the John Wick movies for fights and a laugh, you'll for sure get those. And this, I would say, is the least funny of the 4, although it picks up steam as far as that goes. Like the gags in this are more visual, I would say, than quips.
Yeah, there's almost a Simpson level gag in the, not the final scene, but the lead up to the final scene.
Yes, I know what you're talking about. Yeah. But for most of the movie, they're not going for big laughs. It's more kind of, it amuses you more visually, either by how characters carry themselves, by where characters are struck and stuff like that. I'm not saying they're going around kicking each other in the nuts, but there will just be kind of funny scenes that make you smirk, which, not to say that the other movies don't do that. This is the shootout between Common and John Wick in John Wick 2, where they're just kind of like quickly just like sniping at each other with their guns, is hilarious. This movie has more of those types of laughs than funny lines, but there are a couple later in the movie.
And then also when it comes to Skarsgård, he's such a great Bond-esque villain in this, where it really does feel like you're pulling him right out of a Bond movie.
Yeah, he has. Have you ever noticed the thing? I brought this up on Brunch's review, and Pete said he couldn't say that he noticed it, but then once I explained it, he was like, okay, yeah, I get it. And then when we put out the review, a couple of people were like, yes, I get. Have you ever noticed the thing with coffee in John Wick?
No, what do you mean?
So much stuff is done over coffee, and coffee is shot as though it's like a gun in these scenes where they'll do like the close shots of like the guns as they're fighting and shooting each other. So much stuff, like the pouring of coffee and how different people take their coffee. And there's a pretty heavy-handed look at how Bill Skarsgård's character takes his coffee. And it's not a spoiler, but he puts multiple teaspoons of sugar in a relatively small glass, a small coffee cup. And then when he has a pretty serious meeting, one in which he's supposed to be intimidating, he's eating a piece of cake. And they really kind of lean into the, like, he's a skinny enough guy, but he's a sweet tooth, and he comes off as maybe a little spoiled, somebody who doesn't really think of consequences and more. Although that's funny, I say that, spoilers, kind of, that's an important word in this movie. All they do is really talk about consequences throughout the whole thing, but he's the type of character that isn't afraid to bite off a little more than he could chew. And I don't know. I noticed that right away. I was like, man, they are really shoving like the sugar down our throat with this guy. And as the movie unfolds, you're like, yeah, it would make sense that this would be a dude who probably doesn't eat any other meals all day, but will just like have some cake when he's hungry, which by the way, that cake looked incredible.
Oh,
and
yeah.
It got me rethinking how I take my coffee. I was like, oh man, I'd be quite a bit heavier, but imagine if I brought sugar back into the mix. Wow. But yeah, next time you're watching John Wick movies, just notice like in the beginning of John Wick 2, when the guy comes and gives John the marker, he comes in and John offers him coffee and they like wait for the machine and everything. There's, I tweeted, I was like, maybe I'm not the man for this job, but I would like somebody at the Ringer or someplace that kind of professionally overthinks things to rewatch the John Wick movies with an eye on the coffee, because there's something there, man.
The settings and the location in this one too also plays into it being the best looking one.
Definitely. Japan, France,
yes,
New York City. Can't really beat it. And they really France up the France scenes,
yes,
without being too Francy. And I'm sure that makes all the sense in the world. But there's a scene where they're really kind of touching a lot of the map, for lack of better term, and doing like a cool, if you're an assassin in France, here's what your day might look like.
Yeah. And then, not to get too into the fight scenes, but a couple that did stand out to me. We got what felt like 10 minutes of nunchucks.
Yes. Yeah. A lot of nunchucks. I was distracted in those scenes because there are people wearing masks and they look very much like, I don't know if you're a fan of the 70s and 80s rock band Styx, but they look a lot like the Mr. Roboto Kilroy masks, and it's very, very distracting. But those are still great fight scenes. I would say that this has the best group fight scenes of the four, even if like individual combat has kind of plateaued for this franchise, understandably, because the first couple,
it's tough to touch what they've done.
Exactly. And the first couple feel so innovative in that
and
it's like
fresh.
This,
yes.
Yeah. This like martial arts with guns thing.
There was a scene with Akira that I absolutely love. And there was a kill that she had that I thought was like the first big kill of the movie, where I'm like, oh, we're getting back into that John Wick fun.
Yeah. And it was rather graphic. Are we thinking of the same one?
Where she climbs a big fat guy?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Man. Yeah. All of that entire fight scene, I could see if anybody does come out of this movie feeling that this was too long, that's a scene, and the radio scene are probably two areas where it might want to cut. I wouldn't want to cut from either of those scenes. And I do agree that by the time it gets to the radio scene, there's a lot of like John Wick versus Stranger scenes that have already happened, so you don't really need it. But man, it really serves well to tucker him out for when he gets to some of the heavy hitters later. Man, it's just like, it's like stretching before a race or something.
And then before we give a score here, it's really with all the movies of, I just want to know the rules. Like, how many times can he be hit by a car?
Yeah. Yeah. He gets hit by a car like in the midsection a lot. The clothing helps him out for when he gets shot, but he does get shot a lot for a guy who is alive.
What a head trauma. He's getting hit in the head cars constantly.
This movie does have an Austin Powers 2, Spy Who Shagged Me. It has a Why Won't You Die moment, though.
Yep, it does.
From a great character. So,
DJ, for those of you who are tardy to the Macangoo party, we rate everything on a 40 hot dog rating system. You can give your own rating at the end if you want, DJ. You don't have to play by the rules here. But just to work our octagon into this, just like the rest of the John Wick franchise, this is tons of fun. The ending is super satisfying. They found a great way to finish, I would say, the final chapter of these Wick movies. That's not a spoiler because they've been talking about that for a while. These are going to go away for a while if they even bring them back. Also, there is a tick of bore for me when we get to the end of Act 2, beginning of Act 3. The fights are a little samesies to me. Credit to the cast. This is my favorite John Wick cast. Best building of the world around him. Also, it's the best looking of the movies as well. And just that overhead fight scene. I loved that. That is such a standout. That is so great. That is Pants 10 City. I got this at 37 hot dogs.
Get out. I had 37 too.
Yeah.
I was doing calculations to see. So I'll come around eventually on scoring movies. I get in my head about it and I'm like, is that really what we want to do here? But we do Letterboxd, and I don't love the Letterboxd experience, but I gave it a 4.5 on Letterboxd. So I was doing some quick mental math. Wink, wink, wink. I was Googling like 40 divided by whatever. And I got to 37.2. So I also give it 37 hot dogs. And if that sounds crazy, the two guys went and saw a John Wick movie and came back with 37 hot dogs for you. I don't know what to tell you, buddy. It's an incredible movie.
Yeah, the only thing holding it back from being perfect is maybe length, is maybe, if they could have found just another way to introduce a new fighting style in there or something that might have done it. But there's just so much about this movie that I love.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to the 5th one whenever it does come out, which is, that's another thing. Like, coming off of 3, I wasn't jonesing for another one. I was like, all right, so it's only natural that this will get worse as time goes on. And maybe it was the time off. I don't know what it was, but
they just simplified it. They brought it back to almost what the first one was of, if you want to get out of this, you need to beat this guy.
Let's also note, we haven't mentioned the dog element of it. It does go back to a lot of like the hallmarks of this franchise, which are dogs. Proximity is a big thing, and like how things are shot and how things look. The close shooting thing for sure comes back in a big way in this movie on several levels. I just thought it was incredible.
Spoilers. One of the scenes that we talked about earlier that had a real Simpsons vibe to it was the staircase scene where he makes it all the way up to get to this shootout, which is, so the end of this movie is a duel that is between him and Donnie Yen. Donnie Yen was given this role by Skarsgård to participate in the duel, and he gets all the way up, and it takes roughly 10 minutes to get up this staircase.
220
and then once
steps.
he gets to the top, he gets pushed back down. All the way back down. And they show every roll on every single step as he goes down. And it is so funny.
I need to see what the ADR for that looked like. Just Keanu Reeves in a booth. Because really, like, I don't know. I should have timed it.
Yeah.
It's probably like 30 seconds of just like,
yeah.
But it does such a good job of just breaking your heart, because you see how painstakingly difficult, and they say at the beginning that I think it's 220 steps. They're like, will he make it up the 220 steps? Because the radio person is talking about, or the radio DJ is talking about, he's got to go up these 220 steps, and he's got all these obstacles. He's got to fight off all these people. And that's a great scene in and of itself, where he's shooting people in front of him. He's kicking the people behind him. Then once he passes the person he shot, he's got to kick them back down and make sure that they stay dead. And he's really got his hands full. And then gets to the top, and a guy just essentially breathes on him, and he falls all the way down. That's an incredible scene. And now that we're spoiling, when I say the proximity thing, like everything, the fact that this movie culminates in guys literally shooting each other from closer and closer and closer.
Yeah.
Amazing.
So good. And also, I mean, you pick up on the fact that John Wick definitely didn't shoot in the duel, but the satisfaction of him blasting Bill Skarsgård in the head was completely worth it.
Terrific. So the first time I did not catch it. Going into it the second time, I'm going to be like, let me see how easy this is to tell.
Yeah.
And then I was like, oh shit, it was really easy to tell.
They were right next to each other. And John already clipped him twice.
Right. So like he just became a terrible shot. Yeah. I that's one of those things though, man, when a movie is great when it doesn't give you a second to process something that it's handing to you.
Oh, hi. It's Goo from the Mac and Goo Movie Club. If you like what you just saw, you can find full episodes of our program on Apple Podcasts, TuneIn, Stitcher, CastBox, iHeartRadio, or wherever podcasts are found. And now it's time for girls jumping on trampolines.